Yo, what up? So, this is me breaking the seal on the whole doing a video review in your car thing. Yeah, I figured that I might as well get it over with. I don't know how well this is going to go over. I don't know if this is going to do good, if it's going to do bad, if it's going to be whatever. But in any case, this is Doomsday Clock. This is a obviously DC's big event. This is their actual attempt to cash in on Watchmen. It's done by Jeff Johns. It's done by Gary Frank. It's been kind of a polarizing sort of thing, because a lot of people, it's kind of weird. I'll admit this wasn't what I was expecting, and I thought it was going to be better. I'll tell you that straight up. I think the positives outweigh the negatives, but the negatives are not insignificant. As you can see, this is issue 1 of 12. They're really trying to recreate the whole feel about Watchmen, from the cover to the 9-panel grid that they stick to pretty religiously, to the the ancillary material in the back here. They're really trying hard to stick to the old Watchmen feel. Although the only thing that's different is that in the original Watchmen, the cover was actually the first panel of the issue, whereas here that doesn't seem to be the case. But even like the other covers that aren't variants seem to be doing that. So yeah, it's funny because if this first page was different, I don't think I would have too much of a problem with it. So like I said, I saw several reviews of this. I saw Diversity in Comics review. I saw Underground Geeks. I saw Mariasha's. I didn't see Weaponized Nerds Rage, but I was in his live stream where they were talking about this. I pretty much found myself agreeing with Diversity in Comics. The main problem is that Rorschach, for better or worse, is the coolest character in the original Watchmen. He's the character that has the most the most consistent morality. He's the one that's most deeply characterized. He's the one that you end up sympathizing more with him just because his story ends up being stronger. And this Rorschach is not that Rorschach. That Rorschach died, and they did not bring him back for this, apparently. This is not the real Rorschach, despite his numerous insistences to the contrary. This is, in fact, Black Rorschach. So that's pretty disappointing. I mean, part of the problem with Watchmen is that, or more specifically, part of the problem of integrating Watchmen into the mainline DC universe is that there's, of the characters in it, really only 3 of them were cool. Rorschach, Dr. Manhattan, and kind of Ozymandias, just because of the twist with him, if nothing else. Silk Spectre, nobody cares about Silk Spectre. Night Owl, nobody cares about Night Owl. Minutemen, nobody cares about them. Comedian is dead, so who cares? So it's like they're trying to integrate Watchmen characters into the mainline DC universe, but like one of the cool ones is dead. One of the cool ones is a giant naked blue dude who has nigh unstoppable power, and the other one is evil. So we find out some so it's kind of what the point. So the big problem with this issue, frankly, is just this first page here. This first page is not a good page. It does not inspire you at all to want to know what's going on. So the original Watchmen, it opened up on the first panel. Shoot. I'm still getting used to this whole doing it in the car thing. So the first panel opened up with the famous button with the blood spot, and then it was pulled out a little bit more so that you could see that it was in the street. And then it was more and more and more until finally you look down on the button from the vantage point of where the comedian got dropped off the building and fell down the street. So they're trying to kind of emulate that, but it's not as good. And also the word bubbles, their caption boxes rather, were much more interesting. I can't remember if Rorschach's journal started on that first page or not, or if it was a few pages later, but I remember the first things that Rorschach said are very classic. It was, dead dog, found carcass in alleyway. Soon the streets will overrun with blood, and the gutters will scab over, and all the whores and politicians will look up and shout, "Save us!" And I'll look down and whisper, "No." You know, something very similar to that. Very classic, very easy to remember, very intriguing. It's unsettling. It makes you uneasy, but it also makes you intrigued. This, it's so wordy. And he's surprisingly oblique about it, too. That's the other weird thing. Like, look at this. He says, he describes these group of people. I'm not going to do the Rorschach voice for this guy because it's not Rorschach. He says, the undeplorables scream to hear themselves, deafened in their echo chamber, blaming the other side for what they have instead of who they are. Their tolerance is a one-way street. While the totalitarians stand their ground, covering their eyes, preaching for a return to a rose-colored republic, unaware that for those not like them, the good old days weren't so good. So, a lot of people got triggered by this term, deplorables. I kind of did at first, too, until I realized that the people that he's describing sound a lot more like SJWs than Donald Trump voters, at least I think. Whereas what he calls the totalitarians sound a lot more like a certain kind of conservative. The old Rorschach was very direct. If he wanted to make, poke fun at somebody or to insult them, he would just simply do that. But this Rorschach is using sort of oblique, non-direct language, and it's just a lot more flowery. I mean, relatively speaking, it's not actually flowery. It just feels wordier and less punchy than the old Rorschach. So the plot is just really a setup. Basically, Black Rorschach is getting out these two criminals, Mime and Marionette, who I guess are a reference to two other lesser-used Charlton characters named Punch and Jubilee. I've never read the old Charlton comics. I just know the ones that DC has used and made popular since the 80s, but I don't really know like Charlton all that well. So another thing too is that you can see right here. So there's a popular theory that the ink blots on his face convey Rorschach's emotions, but Dave Gibbons was always very insistent that Rorschach's emotions was expressed more through his body language than through his mask, through the ink blots on it. With this one, it seems like Gary Frank is going for is doing that sort of thing more, because the shapes seem to be much more direct representation of what he's feeling at any given moment. So that just kind of feels off. But then again, it's not really Rorschach, it's Black Rorschach. So he's taking these two to see his partner, and we think his partner is going to be Night Owl. I mean, it's in a sewer. It's even in Night Owl's old lair, but his partner is not actually Night Owl. It's Ozymandias. One thing I noticed about Ozymandias is that he looks very evil. This was something that the movie got really wrong, among several other things, was that in the movie, Ozymandias was just obviously the bad guy, but in the original comic, he seemed very open, he seemed very gregarious, he seemed almost kind of soft and foppish. And then it's only later that you find out that he was the mastermind behind everything. So we find out that Vite, Ozymandias, whatever you want to call him, we find out that the world found out his ruse, that the quote-unquote alien that teleported into New York City and died, causing a psychic backlash that killed 3 million people, was not really an alien invader, that it was a genetically engineered being. So people are smashing up Vite's New York office. The military raids his stronghold in the Antarctic at Karnak, only to find out that he's not there and that he seems to have cancer, which we find out that he does have cancer. So they are trying to find Dr. Manhattan, who at the end of Watchmen, of course, told Veidt that he was going someplace complicated. And so it says that he's looking for him, and it says that then it cuts to the mainline DC universe, which took me a while to figure that out because I didn't really see that that was the Daily Planet at first. So we see Clark, and we see that Clark is having a nightmare about the night that his parents died. So we don't know how much of this is real and how much of this is just a nightmare. Silver Age Superman, his parents actually did die in before he became Superman. New 52 Superman, which was written by Grant Morrison, also his parents died before he became Superman. However, this Superman is, I believe, and I could be wrong, I believe is the Superman from the post-Crisis / pre-New 52 continuity. And in that one, his parents were alive well into adulthood, and in fact, we saw the story in which his father died by a heart attack, and it was I can't remember what the storyline was called, but it was where we got the introduction of the new Brainiac, like the true Brainiac. And it turned out that the true Brainiac was like the superpowered alien who was super strong and super intelligent. And I believe that story was written by Jeff Johns and drawn by Gary Frank, just like this one. So it's like we know that this shouldn't really be the continuity for this particular Superman. Now, this could just be him having a nightmare. They could have changed it, or it could be that the being that we saw messing with the timeline in Action Comics' Oz Effect is the same one that is causing this to happen. So maybe the reason why this changed is because somebody is messing with continuity. So my theory, and it's not like a full theory about that, because I wondered, why would Jor-El, if it really was Jor-El, because this ties in with the Action Comics storyline, the Oz Effect, which is pretty good. And in that one, you had Superman's biological father, Jor-El, calling himself Mr. Oz, and he was going around causing problems for Superman. And I always wondered, like, Mr. Oz, why did he call himself that? Well, what if the being that's messing with the timeline, the being that we saw at the end of the button, the being that has got people like Mxyzptlk and a couple others really scared, what if it's not actually Dr. Manhattan? What if Ozymandias, who, remember, just saw his empire crumble, who knows he's dying of cancer, what if he does the same thing to himself that John Ostrander accidentally did to himself? Thinking, and Veidt may think, well, I've got nothing left to lose anyway. We have to find Dr. Manhattan to put this all back together. Plus, he has a god complex anyway. So what if he just literally made himself into a god? So maybe that's what this whole thing is building up to, that it's not Dr. Manhattan versus Superman, that it's actually Ozymandias that's messing with Superman. As also, the way that this whole sequence here plays out, where it says, find him wherever he's gone, and then we immediately cut to Superman, it almost makes me wonder if they're saying that Superman actually is Dr. Manhattan, or at least is somehow a creation of Dr. Manhattan. I don't know. We'll see. I'm just speculating. Obviously, this thing is 12 issues. I was not impressed with this first issue, especially with this opening. It's just so wordy, and it just needs to get to the point faster. But I'm still, this is only issue 1. Maybe it's just a really wonky issue 1. I think the next issue drops next month, so we'll see how that goes. I'm going to stick with it. Yeah, tell me what you thought, though. Tell me if you liked this. Tell me if you agree with any of my little theories, or if you completely disagree with them. Tell me if I'm wrong about any of the interpretations of this stuff. Like, comment, subscribe. In any case, this is Unring Chevron signing off.